here I am. I came on this show for the first time. I didn't know what I was getting into, but I was so fascinated. So I enjoyed myself so much. I said, I have to come on another time and keep coming, become a recurring guest. There you go. That's me kind of inviting myself onto this show. But at least I've got my second opportunity. And you guys should not miss the opportunity to subscribe, to like, and give these guys like 5 stars. Maybe not for this episode, but for every other episode they should. It's called Taking It Slow, but they take you on a wonderful ride, and one that you will enjoy as much as I do.
It's another Sunday. You know what that means. It's time to take it slow. It's just me again today. Vishu has been dealing with a COVID situation in the family, and he might not be a part of the upcoming episodes for a couple of weeks. We are all dealing with this in whatever way we can, and just hope that everyone who is listening to this, your families are safe, your loved ones are taken care of, and we'll try to keep the show going forward as planned, with just me in charge for now until the time the situation at Vishu's place improves. And all we can do is pray for the betterment of the situation at his family. So, yeah, back to today's episode. Our guest today is our second ever two-time guest. The only other person who we've had twice on our podcast is our good luck charm, who appears each time we add a zero to our subscribers. So, in case you want to see her again, press that subscribe button. We loved speaking to our guest so much last time, we couldn't wait to have him on again. Like me, he's a fan of finding stories in everyday lives, which makes him a master storyteller. Like me, he's a cricket fanatic, which, when coupled with the storytelling part, means he's the brain behind two of the most intriguing stories of Indian cricket. He's the author of the Dhoni Touch, which is MS Dhoni's biography, of course, and is coming up with the biography of Suresh Raina, which is called Believe. Like me, he's a wrestling fanatic too. Thus, when I heard about his new podcast, Chop On, which talks about cricket and wrestling, we felt it was exactly what our appetites wanted. Like me, he's an amazing human being, one of the nicest ones I've come across. Well, maybe he's a little nicer than I am. Unlike me, it's his birthday today, and he's still nice enough to take time out for me. It gives me a lot of pleasure to welcome back on the Taking It Slow podcast someone I now call a friend, the man whose hair would have rocked each of the last 6 decades, Bharat Sundareshan. Hey, man, welcome back to the Taking It Slow podcast. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you so much. Yeah, it is. I've grown a year older, which means a year closer to the end, which is good. Like, yeah, I'm a realist. So no, I don't feel very old at all. I think I feel younger than I did when I
Hmm.
turned 25 last year. And I said, what better? Like, how can I spend it better? But by being on your podcast.
Welcome back, Bharat. So, what has been keeping you busy? So I saw that you're about to release Believe, which I'm really looking forward to. You're taking orders now. It is open for booking.
Yeah, they started the pre-order sales, or whatever it's called, pre-launch sales last month,
Hmm.
uh, and apparently it became a bestseller even before, it
Wow.
launched. So I did not know there's so much love out there for Suresh Raina, but I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm happy that it's his story. It's really it has my name on the cover, but it really is his story. So
Hmm.
I'm very I'm looking forward to seeing how people in India react to the Suresh Raina story. I think it's a fascinating story, and I'm not just saying this because I've written the book, but generally, I think a lot of us can connect with it at different levels, and that
Hmm.
for me is the best part about it. And what has been keeping me busy of late is all the IPL drama, and I'm sure we'll talk about it.
Yeah. So let's start with talking about the IPL drama itself. The bubble has been breached. Some say it was always going to happen. Some say it was an impending disaster. Some say a number of people have a number of polarizing opinions about it. Some
Hmm.
of them say it shouldn't have been taking place in the first place. I am not one of those people. I think it was a necessary distraction or a necessary uh, light at the end of the tunnel of the day that we had to look forward to. We It was something that helped us take our minds off for like 3 hours from the depression all around us, and it really calmed me down. If I speak about myself as a person, where do you stand on those opinions?
And that takes me to what has been keeping me busy in the last 2 or 3 weeks, because I've done a lot of radio and TV here, trying to
Hmm.
explain to the Australian audience what is the IPL in terms of what it means to like the Indian audience, but at the
Hmm.
same time, how it can look odd that they're having a glitzy sporting event in the midst of the tragedy that is unfolding in India, which uh, you know it's something that I've used a lot in the last couple of weeks. It feels like for us Indians who live overseas, we're leading this double life. I'm here in
Hmm.
Adelaide. It's kind of been the safest city to be in around the world. Touch wood. I'm walking the dog. I'm going out and doing whatever I want to. Went for a classical concert last night. Not my kind of music, but I went because and then you come back home and you think about everything that's happening in India. You go
Hmm.
on Twitter, and one like every morning I wake up, I want to check on my mother if she's doing fine in Bombay. My
Hmm.
wife's the same. Her parents live in Calcutta. So it's been a weird time, and I've tried my best to explain to a lot of Australians, like I said, through all these platforms, what it means for the IPL to be happening, or when it was happening. And like you said, there is a massive segment of Indian society, whether they're privileged or not, for whom the brightest spot in their day was turning on the television and watching some cricket. And I've never really bought into this whole cricket as a religion business, because I don't know, it's never sat well with me. What cricket is, or always has been, in my opinion, for Indians, including me and you, is a great escape from our reality, right?
Fair,
And this is
fair,
something
fair.
it's very difficult to explain to people from a first world country where there's social welfare, where
Hmm.
last year in Australia they had systems like JobKeeper and Job Seeker for those who had lost jobs because of the pandemic. But nothing like that exists in India. And we both
Yep.
know that.
Yep.
You might be more privileged than people who aren't as lucky as us, but still, like, we aren't privileged enough to go without a job for more than a few days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the reality of life. And cricket, and to an extent Bollywood, if you are into movies, they're all like just forms of escape. Our relation to sport is very different to how Australians consume sport. For them, sport is
Hmm.
sport. It's an outdoor
Sport. Yeah.
activity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're like winning and losing, and the whole character of sport is what matters. For us, it's just that ability to forget about everything that's happening in our life, and to just focus on the TV. And which is one of the main reasons for us cricketers are become these idols of sort. We idolize
Hmm.
them, uh,
Hmm.
because you're trying to live vicariously through them.
Through
Whereas in
them. Yeah.
countries like Australia and England, egalitarian societies, where you don't like they actually don't want their sportsmen or sportswomen to uh, the tall poppy syndrome exists here. They don't want them to be
Yeah. Yeah.
like a star. So it's a very different concept, but at the same time, you can argue that it just looked bad, right? It just did not sit well in terms of optics, that you're having an IPL when there are so many people dying. So personally, I wasn't for or against the IPL happening. It's my job. So the more cricket that happens, the better it is for me. But for me, it was more about them deciding to go forward with this whole caravan format, where they took it to Delhi, where there were so many cases there and people were struggling. That was always fraught with danger. And as we've seen, it
Hmm.
has led to ultimately the suspension of the league.
You touched upon briefly on the people whose jobs rely on the IPL as well. There are a number of freelancers, a number of journalists, camera crew who also make a living through this. An ecosystem that revolves around these 2 months, or this bucket of 2 months during this calendar year. Most of them have made plans based on these 2 months. Does that affect them really adversely, or are they reasonably taken care of? You might be a part of that ecosystem yourself. So who better than you to tell us about it?
No, I mean, again, even there, we are the privileged sort. Like, we get paid, most journalists who are employed by either a website or are contracted by a website or a newspaper or any media organization. like everyone else, we get paid monthly, so it doesn't really matter whether the IPL is happening or not. But like you said, the freelance market has grown massively in the last few years in cricket around the world, and there are a lot of people who now would end up losing out on a lot of money because
Yep.
they have nothing to write about, or like the IPL is gone. But you actually have to feel bad for the people like who work in the broadcast crew, not the commentators per se, but everyone from a handler to the guy making sure that the camera equipment reaches the ground in time. And there are like, from what I heard, there are 9,000 people whose jobs revolved around the IPL, which includes
Wow.
everything, not just the cricketers. And
Uh-huh.
so, and everybody's out there trying to earn a living. There's been this big debate in Australia about the Australian cricketers who are there and who are now gone on to the Maldives and all.
Maldives, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're paid like, was it greed that took them to India? It's not. Like, it's you're going there to earn a living. That's how you earn a living. So you can't hold that against anyone. And yeah, it's unfortunate. I do feel I know a lot of people who are freelancers for whom now even that source of income's gone.
What is the sentiment in Australia like? So we've heard a number of comments from the Australian Prime Minister. Then the stance has softened a little, but after Michael Slater also criticized him pretty harshly on his Twitter. What is the public sentiment in Australia like? Are they in favor of keeping the virus away from their country, even if it requires not letting their own citizens enter back?
Yeah, majority of people are quite shocked by that decision. To suspend flights, which means 9,000 Australians are now stuck in India, residents and citizens. A lot of them Indian origin. And B, when they announced that they would be jailed and or fined a lot of money if they were to make it to India make it to Australia before May 15th. So majority of people have really come out very strongly and criticizing the Prime Minister and the Australian government for taking what they feel are very harsh calls. Even this morning, I bumped into a neighbor who was like, how can you abandon your own mates? And
Your own citizens, yeah.
told me one of the second page of the Australian passport. Apparently, I don't think I've really read one. I don't have one. Is about almost something along the lines of, I paraphrase here, not leaving. Every Australian citizen has a right to come back to his own country, which is not happening at least till May 15th. So yeah, most people are critical of that call, but the jury is kind of divided when it comes to the cricketers. They're like, oh, yeah,
they earn so much. They're tier one people. They chose
exactly.
this. Yeah,
exactly. And now, I mean, I even heard on one of the local, on ABC yesterday, an Australian citizen who's of Punjabi origin, a lady who's now stuck in Amritsar, and she was talking about, I'm stuck in Amritsar. I don't know how I'll ever go back to my house in Sydney, in Australia, wherever she lives. Whereas these cricketers have gone on some vacation to the Maldives. So a lot of people do share that sentiment with her, at least in Australia.
Did you enjoy the IPL? Abhi jab chal raha tha, so without crowds, with so much going around, did you really enjoy it as a spectator purely?
Yeah, I mean, the matches start really late here. So they don't start by of course, the 7:30 matches start at 11:30. And back when I was covering the IPL, there were only 8 p.m. games. So I'm glad at least if I really want to, I can watch half an hour or so before I go to sleep. But I used to watch it only because I was doing that. I'll be honest, because I was doing with Mel Farrell, which we've been doing for a while now on YouTube.
Yeah.
So we had to do it bi-weekly. So I would watch a lot of highlights, but a few times I did watch some of the live matches. But well, the cricket was what it was, really. I mean, it just felt like another IPL season, but it just felt very awkward. Especially going back to what I said, leading the double life, when you feel guilty almost at times when you realize that I'm able to do so much here, even stepping out of my own house, whereas people back home can't even do that. And then tweeting about the IPL was very awkward. I'll be honest. You go on Twitter especially, and your tweet about oh, Sanju Samson, such a beauty to watch. Oh, his cover drive so good. And that tweet is sandwiched between someone asking for like oxygen cylinders and
Yeah.
someone like, talking about how his uncle or some cousin has passed away. You just feel like an idiot, like, when you are tweeting about that. It felt very awkward from that sense. And, the fake crowd noise, now we've gotten used to it in the last year or so.
It's something that's not for me. It's not for me.
It's just weird, and especially in the circumstances, whenever they would show that wide long shot of the stadium, there are empty roads, and that's not the India I know. Like, it's been 2.5 years since I last saw India, but that's not the India I can relate to. And then you hear this fake crowd noise and this weird chants of ABD and all. It just felt very awkward, really.
Same here. I echo very, very similar thoughts. So we did watch it every day, 7:30, because as you said earlier, you had to find an escape from whatever is going on throughout the day. But it just felt plastic. It didn't feel real. It didn't feel real. So in a way, I am happy that it's not happening anymore, because we can now grieve properly for the people who we have lost, and we can have the sense of realism back in our lives, probably.
Absolutely.
But when it was happening, yes, it was a distraction. That I won't deny that. Speaking of that, CSK were finally doing something this year, and speaking to you, have you become the official biographer for CSK now?
I never even thought about that till someone brought it to my attention at the start of the IPL. And I was like, oh, yeah. And like, people have actually asked me, so are you writing on Ravindra Jadeja next? So I'm like,
nice.
Okay. I've not decided on anything. Nor has Ravindra Jadeja ever come to me for anything but hair advice, of course. But I don't know how that. It just worked out that way. Again, like with the Dhoni book, the Suresh Raina book was not like wasn't my idea originally. Like, I didn't like suddenly wake up one morning and say I wanted to write on Suresh Raina. Of course, I've known him for a long time through by being a journalist, and we all kind of started like when India came here on this tour of Australia, I call it, this is my generation, this team.
Yeah,
we all came into the industry at the same time, them playing, me writing. So a majority of them, not the Rishabh Pants of the world, of course. Raina maybe was in the started playing for India 2 or 3 years before I joined or I became a journalist. So I've known him for a while. So the book offer came through Penguin, and so they said, look, Raina wants to do this book about his life, and I agreed. But I never thought of it as me writing a book on Chinna Tala after I wrote about Tala. But I will say this though, when I did I watched the first game. It was Chennai's first game, because a cousin was visiting, so he wanted to watch the IPL. I said, okay, we'll watch it together. And I was rooting for Raina. I'm not kidding. I was very happy when he made that 50. It was around the time they were about to announce the pre-order, pre-order thing, and I was like, yeah, he better score runs.
Good timing.
Don't let me down.
Nice. So, who do you think is next in CSK whose biography you will be writing? Will Sam Curran have a biography out before Imran Tahir?
The only thing that intrigues me about Sam Curran is, again, why is his hair so much lighter than Tom Curran? I don't know. It's been bothering me for a while now. Yeah. And also the fact that Tom Curran is every time I see him, he looks more and more like Dale Steyn.
Even he thinks of himself in the morning कि आज मैं और कैसे model कर सकता हूँ अपने आप को, looks wise, bowling wise, everything. Exactly. Now he's wearing a bandana as well, like Dale Steyn.
Yeah, and they're all from Southern Africa, so maybe there is something there. But Sam Curran, I'm a big Sam Curran fan. He just is one of those cricketers, right? You want to root for him, there's something in his eyes.
He has a lot of heart. You can tell he has a lot of heart.
Exactly. So, but I don't know. Maybe N. Srinivasan. Who knows?
Nice. I would order that first day. That's for sure. How was writing or assisting Suresh to write Boliv different than writing with MS Dhoni? They have uniquely different stories, that's for sure. Suresh Raina has a story that originates from the Under-19s World Cup. Yeah. You have mentioned quite a few times your process of writing the Dhoni touch. You went to his hometown, you met people who he was close to, and all that process you've mentioned. You've gone on record quite a few times. How was this different from him?
I mean, different in many ways. Like you said, the Dhoni book was like my book on him in a way. That was still my book. Like, it's a Bharat Sudarshan book on MS Dhoni. And like, it was intriguing because I never interviewed him. Like, but it was like the Godfather. Like, he like, I had to kiss his hand, and he let a little like clique he had of people around him talk to me and open up, and that's how that book worked out. This is more Suresh Raina's story. I wrote the whole thing, but it is in his voice, and it's I wouldn't call it a biography. It's more a memoir. So he wanted a lot of his life. He wanted it to be like a not a self-help book, but somewhere like where people could pick up something, some lessons. So that's why the way I wrote it was again in his voice, but like a memoir where we talk a lot about the lessons he learned from various aspects of his life, like being ragged in hostel to being this young boy from from UP going to England and playing club cricket, like where he could barely speak English, to everything, to getting married, to parenthood, to everything. Like and at every stage what he picked up, and it's called Believe because it's a message of sort that he got from Sachin Tendulkar in 2014. Yes. I think apparently he said believe in yourself, and he was so taken by that message that he got a tattoo made somewhere on his body. I don't know where. So that was the reason for the book, the title of the book. It was very different. This involved like me having lots of conversations with Suresh, like so constantly calling. But I will confess that I was more a celebrity than him in this process, because it all happened. Though they came to me in September, I, of course, the master procrastinator that I am, took my time to agree to doing it. And then we kind of started speaking in October. And before you knew it, this whole crazy India tour started. So I was driving all over the place, like I said last time. And, driving past borders, finding motel rooms and all that. And then all this, like, I was the one, like, kind of putting our phone calls off. And I remember one time his agent called me and he was complaining. He said that, अरे यार सुरेश बहुत मुझे फोन किया था, वो बोल रहा है कि जब देखो भरत भाई, जब भी मैं फोन करता हूँ गाड़ी चला रहे हैं या कुछ कुत्ते के साथ जा रहे हैं, like so I was more the celebrity, but I think we must have spoken to each other like 20, 25, 30 times, I guess. But I think we found our that wavelength of sorts maybe after the third or fourth conversation. And then he opened up a lot. He spoke a lot about various factors of his life. And I think it made for an interesting story. But it was different because I still had to write it in his voice, right? Like even though, I mean, if you have read a lot of me, if you read it, there will be some bits of Bharat Sundaresan in there. Like, you can pick it up, I'm sure. But it still had to be in his voice. So it was a different challenge. Like, it's generally quicker to write it we call it an as told to, at least that's what we used to call it in the Indian Express, where you just interview someone, but then you write it in their voice, which is what it was like. So I have a lot of experience of doing that. So it was definitely a quicker process than the MS Dhoni book, where I had to really break my head and write it in my words. But yeah, it helped though. Like, having one, that's what I've learned. Once you write one book, now I know why people who write books write a lot of books. It's just like, it's a process you can kind of carry forward.
Nice. Look forward to it, man. With your procrastination skills, I don't think N. Srinivasan would be very impressed. So choose wisely.
Like, yeah, he's a man on a mission always. So I don't think maybe he'll take an N. Srinivasan book to fix me. Who knows? Not that I'm planning to write, like, to anyone watching this and listening to this.
It is just ingest. Everything is ingest. Another thing that I really look forward to now is your podcast that you've recently started, the Chop On podcast. So as I said in my intro, the two things that I am really passionate about are cricket and wrestling, which incidentally you are very passionate about as well. Why start a podcast?
So the guy I'm doing the podcast with, I didn't know him before. Like, I got into this whole wrestling community of sorts, this whole podcast family, and he's an Indian guy. Who was born in America. I mean, Indian origin guy, I should say. I think he's half Indian. He's grown up in the USA. And he knew of cricket, but he never watched cricket before 2015. The 2015 IPL is when he started watching cricket. And in the 5 or 6 years since, he's really like, become a cricket guy. And I think he's a few years younger than me, but he's always been a wrestling guy. He's watched a lot of wrestling, having grown up there. And his take on wrestling is very different. Our take on wrestling, right? Like, we still watched it on. You're much younger than me. I watched it on Prime Sports in the early 90s, and then then Prime Sports became Star Sports. Do you even remember Prime Sports?
Yes, I remember Prime Sports. Yes, I remember Prime Sports.
You're not that younger than much.
I'm not that younger than you.
So then it continued, and our take on wrestling is so much different, right? Like, but I was more fascinated by the fact that an Indian origin guy, like, could get into cricket in 2015 when he was, I think, in his mid-20s, and now he's really, like, cricket has really absorbed him. So I thought I wanted to make the most of it, and it was his idea. He came to me and he said, "Do you want to do a podcast, like, where we bring these two worlds together?" And I thought about it. I was like, you know what? Yeah, why not? Like, we have common interests in a way, and we have common links to this whole Conrad Thompson and those guys. So I said, okay, let's jump into it, do a couple of episodes, and who knows? I said I've never spoken wrestling on before. Like, I've dabbled in it, but not like extensively. So I thought it'll be an interesting exercise. I'll say this though. So the first episode, because I was so nervous about talking about wrestling, I did a lot of research on wrestling. I said, cricket to yaar hamara, like,
by heart tak khel hai,
I know. But then he started asking me some questions. I was like, oh, I should have done some research on this. Yeah, I took the cricket bit a little too much for granted, but no, it's fun. Like, the second episode, I think, and thanks for your feedback. By the way, I forgot to reply to you on Twitter. Rajiv's he's never done any of this before. Like, I'm so fortunate that I've been in an industry where I've not just written, but I've done radio and TV. I've spoken a lot. I just like to speak out as well. Yep. So I'm overexposed in a way to, like, this media. He's just breaking it, and I think he does a sensational job. You should listen to episode 2. You can see him; he's flowering and he's blossoming into his role as well. So I think it will grow as a podcast, but I think more than anything, we'll grow as a pair. Right? It's all about chemistry. These things. So I think, but for me, it was just intriguing that someone would want me to. The first time I ever spoke wrestling on a podcast was with you guys. Which I was very, very happy about. I mean, if I want to have there is another wrestling podcast idea that I and this other cricket journalist friend of mine have been floating. I have my own name in here, but I mean, we used to be colleagues back in the Indian Express. So that's a very different format, though. That's purely wrestling, and it's purely about two Chembur boys talking about wrestling. So, we tried recording, but he's just been busy. He's with another newspaper right now in India. So he's a well-known name as well in the cricket journalism industry. So it's not Sid Monga, who I also love sharing.
I was about to guess that. Yes.
No. Because Sid Monga and I, we go back a long way. We've done more tours together and spent more nights on the same bed than I think we have with our respective partners. But wrestling connects us as well, or keeps us connected. But no. Monga is not much of a talker.
Speaking briefly about the wrestling world today, I heard your thoughts on the Chop On podcast itself, that you're not a huge fan of the Forbidden Door being opened, the collaboration between AEW and Impact and New Japan. Why do you feel that way? If you look at it from a layman's perspective, it is probably one of the most exciting things that has happened in the last decade or so, because WWE has been a monopoly for 3 decades now, 2 to 3 decades. And if the other companies start working together, only then will they be able to give WWE a run for its money, whose performances for its flagship show have been declining big time over the last 3-4 years. So if there is a time for everyone else to come together, like to form a Mahagathbandhan, if I can call it that, it is now.
It is now. I agree with that bit, but I think AEW as a company are doing fine. Their audiences are growing by the day, and if you really put a gun to their head, to Tony Khan's head, I don't think he they actually look at WWE as competition, or like, it's not like the WCW versus WWE days, because
Hmm.
WCW came with a lot of history, like
Hmm.
NWA, and like, Ted
Hmm.
Turner investing a lot of
Yep.
money into it. AEW is like literally come up from the ground 2 years ago, right?
Hmm.
So, and WWE has, like, you can't catch up with them. They're just a monster. So I
Hmm.
think the whole thing of the Wednesday Night Wars as well, which was again, it's us who really, like, come up
Hmm.
with these
Hmm.
ideas, because we were so fascinated by the Monday Night Wars, and
Yep.
we want
Yep.
there to be a war. But I don't think the two companies look at it
It is
that
not
way.
a battle between equals, for sure.
Absolutely not. Yeah, I mean, they just have too much of a. It's literally like saying, if tomorrow you and I started a cola company, let's call it whatever, the Baduju Cola Company for some reason. Nobody will drink that. I'm sorry, but like, yeah, if that is the, and for us to say in 2 years we'll be competing with Pepsi, that just doesn't make sense. Even though it's
Hmm.
not the smartest analogy, but you know what I'm
Hmm.
going with it. Like,
Yep. Yep.
Pepsi
Yep.
is WWE really, for wrestling. What Pepsi is to cola. So I think the AEW is doing fine, and the reason I, even on the Chop On podcast, what I meant was, for me, the most fascinating thing about the Monday Night Wars was, what if Goldberg and Austin would, like, have get into the ring together? Like, what would Undertaker versus Sting be? Like, that
Hmm.
fantasy booking aspect of wrestling really kept me more interested than, because once that happens, right? Like, once Sting and the Undertaker got into the ring, like, what next? Like, what do I have to look forward to? Like, in the sense, knowing that, like, it's the forbidden door is a great way of describing it. Maybe it's just my personality. That's what keeps me more excited than, like,
Hmm.
I'm not saying I'm a stable boy who's always like, that's not stable boy, honestly. I prefer being the prince, but but it just makes for more fascinating TV, or more fascinating wrestling, and especially in a world where the wrestling that we know is gone. It's never coming back. Like, there's just
Yeah.
too much information out there about wrestlers and wrestling with social media, and this is the
Kayfabe
reality.
is no more. Kayfabe is no more.
Exactly. Kayfabe is no more. This is the reality era, as they say. So we've already lost that. So the only
Hmm.
thing we have remaining in my book is this whole
Dream
fantasy.
matchups.
Yeah, dream matchups. If so, once the dream matchup becomes an actual matchup, my question is, where to next? Yeah, maybe you can have 3 pay-per-views where they have these greatest of matches, but we all know, like, the reason we've stuck with wrestling for this long is not really, like, chokeholds and the wrestling itself. It's the whole story around it.
Yep.
So once they enter the ring, for me, the bubble is burst. So that's just me, but that's my
Hmm.
take.
Nice. I personally really feel that AEW is playing it really smartly. They are building the collaboration around they're elevating themselves. So
Hmm.
it all revolves around Kenny Omega. So he holds the AEW championship. He holds the Impact
Absolutely.
championship. He's playing up the belt collector gimmick, and
Yeah.
finally the one who will stand up to him, or the one who will stop him. I'm hoping it is Hangman. Uh, is going to be the biggest superstar for the next decade or so. So
Yeah, exactly.
they're probably building up the crescendo to that moment where someone finally steps up to Kenny Omega, this unstoppable monster, this all conquering guy,
Yeah.
and someone finally steps up to him, and that will be his Stone Cold moment, is what I am assuming, or I'm hoping.
Yeah, I mean, it's headed that way, right? Like, for me, I would love MJF somehow turning face, or I don't can't picture him being face.
Can't imagine him being a face, man. Can't, just
But
can't.
almost an anti-hero sort of face, like, and somehow, the a tweener almost, and then, like,
Hmm.
him becoming I'm just a massive MJF fan, and yeah, but who knows? You're right, they're headed in that direction, but again, like, I don't think this whole competition aspect, like, look at Vince McMahon letting Chris Jericho come and talk about AEW on his network. Like, who would have
Hmm.
thought that?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
if it
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
was if it really was WWE versus WCW, that would have never happened back then. Like,
Yep.
so
Yep.
people were fined at times for mentioning, like, a wrestler from the opposite show,
Hmm.
or the other show. So it's interesting. It's, at least it's keeping us talking about wrestling, which I'm not complaining at all about.
See, for the next 5-7 years, WWE are sorted because of the multi-million broadcasting deals that they've secured with Fox, with USA Today, with Saudi. So they're secure in that way. They're not going anywhere. But
Yeah.
if a company thrives, it can only make the product better. So I'm all for it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. As competition is required. Both like WWE themselves have realized that like finally they have competition, which is actually a good thing. And look, you have to realize, Tony, the Khan family has a lot more money than the McMahon family.
Then the
That's
McMahon
just-
family, yes.
Yeah. Actually, the only thing I find missing in AEW, this is just the South Asian in me, is some Pakistani angle. I mean, they are a Pakistani. His dad went from Pakistan with no money and built up this empire. So yeah, I know he's not he's half Pakistani, Tony Khan, but I would love to see that aspect of I'm always for more South Asians entering wrestling.
Bharat, I know you are short on time, so I'll not take any more of your time on your birthday, especially. As always, it has been fascinating and very, very nice talking to you. And it's very sweet of you to take time out on your birthday, and wish you a very, very happy birthday once again. It was lovely speaking to you, man. Take care.
Thank you so much. You made my day.